Now you're probably noticing, starting off, this is different quality from the other stuff. As I've been making this, I'm still finding out all sorts of information, so still having to shoot stuff. This one's a quick one. It's a pretty simple way to start out. I mean, as you saw on the last part, we've discovered the beginnings of the lies, and that's where I was discovering everything myself. And also, in doing research, you discover more lies and more lies, and the main focus of this episode is going to actually be on the clients and the people and the conventions that Sean and Strangeland Fraudities has defrauded since, I guess, existence of this quote-unquote company. So I feel like we really need to get something laughable out of, basically at the start of this. And so before we get into the clients and everything that he's been lying about representing and this and that and the other, look at this picture. You're probably like, why is there a picture of Sean with Taylor Swift? Or at least a fake Taylor Swift. And the answer is pretty hilarious. As you can see, this was posted on his page as a throwback photo, tagging the actual Taylor Swift, making it seem like this was a picture with the actual Taylor Swift. When people were commenting on it, he was commenting back about how sweet she was, and that when somebody asked if it was a cardboard cutout, because it's obviously not real, he was like, no, it's not. He was completely into wanting people to believe that this was a photo he had gotten with Taylor Swift, as awkward as the pose is. And yeah, no, this was also lies. One quick Google search, you can find out that this is from Madame Tussauds Museum in Orlando, Florida, and look at the pictures they posted on their Twitter page. It's actually the same outfit and the same pose. I mean, it's things like this that he had no reason to lie. He could just be like, hey, having fun at Madame Tussauds. But no, throwback to when I met the Taylor Swift at a wax museum. Yeah, okay. Now we're going to go back to another client. Now, the day that I told him he needed to pay back the guy for the camera, he was so happy while we were eating at McDonald's that I had to pay for his... Once again, I had to pay for his lunch there. He couldn't afford it. But so I bought him lunch, him and his girlfriend. And he was beaming that he booked Lynn Lowry, who's another horror scream queen from like the 70s and 80s. But basically, she was a client of ours, and he said he booked her for the Carolina Fear Fest, that con that happened last month. It was the first one they did in Raleigh. So I was like, cool. Sean said he was going to go and take care of things, but then he wound up going out of state, and he wasn't going to be here. So I asked him, do you want me to go and make sure she's taken care of? And he responded, yeah, go ahead, just make sure I get paid my percentage or everything. Just message the convention and let them know that you'll be, actually going there to rep her. So I did. And I wish it would have ended at that. But of course, knowing this situation, it didn't. I messaged them and they responded, sure, we'll leave you a pass. Just let us know, blah, 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 when you're going to be here. So I get a message from Carolina Fear Fest coming back to me saying, actually, and confirming info with Lynn, she said she already has help at her table. Now, that's not necessarily, doesn't mean anything, obviously sometimes celebrity guests at conventions want to bring in a friend or whatever, family to sit at their table and help them. And that saves the convention having to find a volunteer to help. But at that point, not going to Sean, I decided to reach out to Lynn. Because I just wanted to verify. She spoke to me and she said, the last I heard from Sean, He said he wasn't managing people any longer. He had nothing to do with getting me Carolina Fear Fest. So Sean the whole time had been claiming and promoting that not only was his client going to be there, he was the one that got her there. However, at this point, she wasn't his client anymore, and he didn't book her. So it's a double negative here, just completely of lies. To serve what purpose? I have no clue. And he tried to claim another booking. Tony Moran, he tried to claim that he booked him for a con, and I got a message, and because I was an admin of the Strangeland Oddities page, so I got a message from an angry guy saying, "Hey, I want you to take that down now. I booked that, or Tony Moran for that, not you. I don't want to be associated with you." And at that point, I was like, well, at least he's speaking the truth. And honestly, that was just some of the more recent cons he tried pulling with. Cons, pun intended. If you happen to be following conventions, especially the New Jersey Horror Con, last year, they made a guest announcement. And they announced that Cheech Marin, from Cheech and Chong, and From Dusk Till Dawn and all these other classic films, was coming to the New Jersey Horror Con thanks to Strangeland Oddities. Why they were thanking Strangeland Oddities? Well, you see, Sean announced that he was now the appearance agent for both Cheech and Chong. Now, many successful convention handlers, who rep massive clients, have tried to actually get Cheech and Chong, but it's just something that seemingly they're not interested in. And with that being said, Sean somehow, to have really not been managing anybody of importance at that time, at least of longevity and name value, suddenly in August was able to land Cheech and Chong, and then shortly after that, New Jersey Horror Con, as you can see right here, actually said that they were going to have Cheech as a guest at their show. Thanks to Strangeland Oddities, they were selling photo ops, this, that, and the other. Then, not much time passes by. Strangeland Oddities is promoting, come see Cheech at New Jersey Horror Con. And then the floor caves in, and New Jersey Horror Con releases a statement stating, unfortunately, they were basically misled into being believed by an appearance agent, aka Sean Blair, that he actually repped them when he in fact did not. So they got in contact with Cheech's actual agents, and were looking to maybe do something at a different event. With that being said, obviously he lied about that, and everybody who bought photo ops and everything in advance, they had to be refunded, obviously, because Cheech wasn't going to show up there because Sean didn't rep him nor have the authorization to book him. Unfortunately, Sean's con frauds don't end there, and it actually extends to the other side of conventions. Now, we were just talking about the whole fraudulent booking side, but he's also been involved in some pretty fraudulent media stuff as well. Now, Sean has actually been ejected from multiple cons, and that's been verified from various sources, with conventions like Horror Hound and Mad Monster actually kicking him out of their shows. Now, what was he doing to get kicked out? Well, if you've ever seen Sean at a media event, he's generally walking around. He's got a lanyard on with about 15 or 16 different press badges from prior events, I guess to make it look like he's some grizzled veteran, hardcore media person that's cooler than ice, whatever. And he apparently has used those badges to try to just get in and trick some people into letting him in as press, even when he actually wasn't approved for press. I've heard stories from a couple of people about him getting kicked out of Horror Hound weekend And the main reason being he was not approved for press. Now, for those, first off, before I get into that, for those who don't know, who've never been booked as media or don't, have never done anything in the industry with that, when you're booked as media or press, that means you've been approved by the outlet to cover the event. And that's photos, generally videos of the event, and that can include interviews. Now, not all guests can be interviewed. Sometimes there are contractual obligations, which why they can't. There could be many reasons why. Sometimes they're not allowed to do, or they don't want to do interviews. And that's up to each individual guest and their handlers. Now, another thing is you're not supposed to try to get anything for free, especially on Strangeland's site. They say to maintain the integrity and not accept free things. Well, Sean was going around not really even bothering with interviews. As a matter of fact, if he did interviews, there's literally none released to this day from this Horror Hound event. And the thing was, he was going around to the celebrities just asking for free photos. Now, it wasn't like photos of them interacting with clients, or it wasn't photos interacting with fans or anything. He was wanting selfies with them, I guess, to propagate this image of him being this person that all the celebrities love. He knows all these famous people that are his quote-unquote friends. And it got back to the actual runners of the convention, and they threw him out. Now, something similar happened back in last year, 2018, at another horror convention that runs around the country. Sean went to their event last year. Now, he got in with pretending to be press, not knowing that they don't have press passes there. This one is more fan oriented. They want all the fans to get to have their time with the convention guests. And Sean was going in trying to do interviews with people, and he actually got kicked out by Mad Monster, and was forced to buy a general admission badge. And now the badge for Mad Monster was actually just a wristband. And as you can see in this video of him interviewing Ken Kersinger, he's wearing the yellow wristband that he had to wind up paying for. And that was the thing. Like, I actually, these are what we're gonna go over next. As you can see, these are emails that was sent to me by Mad Monster after getting kicked out of these events. Sean actually sent these emails, and it's the first one states, "Hey guys, it is Sean Blair from Strangeland Oddities. We did press for your event in North Carolina in February, and we're wondering if it is possible to get press passes for your Arizona event. Below is a commercial we did for The Walking Dead and some recent interviews and panels we have done. Thanks again, guys, and looking forward to working together again." Now, here's the thing. First off, he didn't do press for their event in North Carolina, as we've already touched on. He got kicked out of their event and then had to buy a general admission pass, and then he found other ways to get interviews at that point. But he's asking in this first email for press passes, which once again doesn't exist. But I find it funny that he's like, below is a commercial we did for The Walking Dead. He has never shot a commercial for The Walking Dead. The commercial he shot was for the Sonoya Dead Bash, which is a charity event that is held in Sonoya, Georgia. It does feature people from The Walking Dead, and it's a great little convention. But once again, it's not actually from The Walking Dead, so he's misrepresenting. Now he winds up sending up a follow-up email, still wanting to get to Arizona for free. And he's like, "Hey guys, I attended Mad Monster Party Charlotte this year as press." Once again, lies. And interviewed Ken Kersinger and R.A. Milheloff. Probably butchered that name, and I do apologize. I was wondering if I can get 2 passes for Phoenix. I know interviews are not to be done on convention time. We have a bunch set up. So, first off, now he's downgraded it to asking just for 2 passes, 2 free passes. Saying that he he's not going to do interviews there, but he has a bunch set up. Why, as a media professional, would you set up interviews for an event you don't know you are going to be able to go to yet? Because it's obvious he's not wanting to pay for passes. So if they say no, then what happens to those interviews that were set up? He says, our interviewer is actor Shane Dean from Exit to Hell with Kane Hodder and another client of ours, Tiffany Shepis. I am also working on Exit to Hell 2 with my other client, director Robert Conway, also with Kane returning as well as Tiffany. What purpose does that have? There's no reason to include any of that information. Thank you guys. I appreciate it. Looking forward to working together again. Now, once again, you literally can't be working together again because they never worked with you in the first place. He literally sent those emails after he was ejected from Charlotte because he was told there was no press passes and he bought a ticket. But then he sends an email telling Mad Monster that he was pressed at an event that they made him buy a ticket for, like nothing happened. After that, he actually even put that he worked for Mad Monster in his bio, which is now at least thankfully gone. But it's just, overall, it's like this is not how you run a business. This is not how you do anything. Like, this is just, the lies are just insane. And it doesn't stop there. You know, we've covered in this already that he's fraudulently, he's lied about booking people. He's actually fraudulently represented people, like, to book. He frauded press. He pretended to be press, even when he wasn't approved, or even had press passes because they didn't exist for certain conventions. And now we're going to get to the fact that he's even frauded clients. For those of you who don't know, I mean, if you've been watching YouTube enough, if you watch fan films, you probably know the name Chris Notarilli. Chris has done a ton of films. I mean, I remember back in high school seeing his Michael vs. Jason fan films, and he's still doing fan films today. I know one of his most recent ones was a Knight Rider fan film. And he was approached by Sean, and Sean completely took advantage of him in every way, shape, and form. Chris has actually been nice enough to send us a statement to go over, and we're going to do that. And I quote, "When I first spoke to Sean, he told me how he would represent me through a non-exclusive contract. I asked him what he was capable of doing, if he represented me. He proclaimed he would try to get me in as a guest at conventions and help promote my name and my brand. It sounded great. I then mentioned to him that if he knew any investors or had access to distribution, to please let me know, as I was actively trying to make a feature film. He told me he had a pool of investors who invested in the last movie, and if I could wait a couple of months, he was positive he could convince them to invest in my project. I immediately began working on my pitch. We spent the next couple of months discussing the pitch, casting options, etc. He told me he could secure names like Tiffany Shepis, that name seems familiar, and possibly Danielle Harris, but every time I gave him a task, he never was able to complete it. As time moved on, he began discussing plans to move out west. I offered him my spare room to rent. He agreed to take it. His plan was to move in November 1st, 2018. He kept in touch right up until the week of the move when he completely vanished. He stopped responding to my calls, texts, emails, etc. I began to panic. I promised a vacant room to someone and they had bailed on me. I scrambled and managed to rent the room out to someone else, thus sustaining my rent, but I was upset. Several weeks later, I received a half-assed apology from Sean. He explained that he was going through some things and just vanished. I was furious. I told him by this point we were business partners and you don't just vanish like that. It is unprofessional, especially when money comes into play. At some point later, I saw a post on his Facebook page stating that due to the stress of his life and job, he was no longer able to represent the following names. My name was listed. I immediately wrote him, furious that he would publicly post something like this. He swore up and down he didn't write it himself and that it was one of his many faceless assistants. I asked him why would his assistant be posting this to his personal page. He said he didn't know, but he took it down. I forgave him for the incident, but I remained suspicious of his competency. He eventually began to plan a second trip out west and asked if he could stay with me, as he had no other options available. For a man who knew so many celebrities and was looking to buy an apartment on the coast, I was relatively shocked that he couldn't even afford a motel or Airbnb. But my common decency prevailed, and I invited him to stay at my home. He arrived hours late, looking like he had just left an ICP concert. Just as I was about to invite him in, he introduced me to his girlfriend. I didn't know what to say, as I was not expecting him to bring company. I was under the impression he was arriving alone, but I wasn't about to kick a stranger out of my house at night, so I allowed for them both to come inside. Sean and I talked for a bit. I tried to remind him of his obligation to helping me get funding for my film, as that was one of the main reasons he was supposedly out here. He told me his girlfriend knew the investors and that I should go through her to discuss things. His girlfriend. A woman whom I've never met, let alone knew existed before prior to this conversation, I have to now nag for money. I told Sean that since this was his girlfriend, it would probably be more appropriate if he mediated the situation. I would show her the pitch, and he would stay on top of things and make sure he got her contacts to meet with me. Sean proceeded to tell me that he had nothing to do with this, they were his girlfriend's connections, and I should ask her myself. I reminded him that he chose to represent me as his client, and this was part of the job. For the duration of his stay at my home, he spent 80% of his time out and away. He had made plans to go to events, meet with people, and network. He never invited me and never thought to promote me. Whenever I would see him, it would be super late and he would be too tired to talk business. On the final day of his stay with me, he swore he would get me a pitch meeting during his next visit, which would be in 2 months' time. I tried to remain optimistic, but inside I was very angry and upset. I had felt used and taken advantage of, but I kept this to myself, hoping that it would all pay off. Inevitably, he contacted me again to make plans for another trip out west. He asked if he could stay with me again. I told him yes, but only after he confirmed a pitch meeting for me. By this point, 8 months had passed since we first began speaking, and still no progress on my movies had been made. Every name he said he could get, he could not. He had a falling out with the investors of his previous project, and he would continually post about how he was getting all these big-name celebrities as clients. My patience was wearing thin. So I told him, after all this transpired, I could not allow him to stay at my home again until I got a confirmation. He told me I had to message his girlfriend. He had nothing to do with it. I reminded him of his obligations as my representative, and since he lived with his girlfriend, it would be a lot easier to inquire about things than me randomly nagging her. He continued to shirk his responsibility in this situation, forcing my hand. I told him that I could not let him stay at my home again, at which point he proceeded to threaten me. He told me if I double-crossed him, he would tell everyone the sort of person I was, and that nobody would ever watch my films again. This claim, coming on the heels of him offering to get Robert Englund to cameo on my most recent Freddy fan film. Sean swore to bury me. Then his girlfriend proceeded to message me, cussing me out for not letting them stay at my home. She told me that she and Sean had no obligation to do anything for me, and now they have no incentive. She promptly blocked me before I could properly respond. For several months after this fallout, Sean continued to keep me on as a client on his website, despite numerous protests from me both directly and indirectly, demanding him to remove my information. Sean Blair is a fraud. He promises you the world, but he can't even deliver on so much as a thank you. He is a social parasite, hiding under the guise of a man too cool for all of it. In the year that I knew him, he nearly ruined my living situation, sponged off my hospitality, and wasted endless hours of my time making promises he had no capability of delivering. He would never promote any of my projects unless nagged multiple times. He never was able to book me as a guest at any shows. I honestly doubt he even tried. He is just a wannabe with no care or regard for the people he hurts along the way.
Believe it or not, it wasn't just clients that were getting frauded. It was also people that actually I walked in the same circles with. An actress by the name of Danielle McKay, who I met working on the horror film Strip Club Massacre, and has ultimately had her run-ins with Sean. As you can see in this video, at one point she was helping do interviews with him, but it goes much further than that, unfortunately. Now, for her personally, her story starts with actually a friend of hers. Now, he had hired a friend of hers to edit videos for him, basically of interviews. Now, Sean agreed to the terms of payment, then ultimately refused to pay. Then once again, he agreed to sign a contract stating he would pay. Then Sean refused to pay again. After that, Sean said, well, I've spoken to other professionals who say the work isn't worth your price, after agreeing to the cost and the work already being done. Now, for those who don't know, editing, as you're looking here, you may this may just look like rocket science to you or whatever, but it's a lot of work. So to be promised to be paid something, do a good job at it, and then be told no is pretty slack, especially when you're doing work for their company. That's, once again, this is going back to the hotel thing. I was currently hijacking this story a little bit, but as of this recording, he's only paid back a third of it, and he's only said he was paying back half. So throughout, this just proves he can't keep a contract with somebody, and he can't stick to what he's agreeing to pay. Now, with that being said, her friend demanded Sean to take his videos down until payment was received, but Sean never did. So what eventually happened was her friend threatened legal action, and Sean finally paid most of what was due, which, as I was saying with the hotel thing, seems to be his MO. Now, for Danielle herself, he also promised her a job helping found a film company based in LA sponsored by Monster. And he also spreads lies that he's a pro-sponsored skateboarder under Lil Wayne's brand Truck Fit. As we've mentioned before with fraudulently posting clients, he's promoted him being the agent for many clients. Steve-O, Lil Wayne, Fred Durst, this, that, and the other. And I've gotten word back from a couple that he'd never repped Bizarre, and which was kind of funny enough, he announced that Chuck Norris was going to Bubba Fest and that he'd see y'all there because, you know, he was the Chuck Norris's rep. He announced it on Strangeland and everything, that he was working so hard to make this happen, and it finally came true. Well, I emailed Chuck Norris's manager, his actual manager, Eric, and Eric said, this man has nothing to do with Chuck whatsoever. And he said he was going to get the link taken down from his site, and it is down. And actually, on top of this, to kind of close the page on the whole fraudulently representing people, it was sent to me that Sean has since, before even this video came out, he announced that he was downgrading his client list to close friends and family, aka his way of lying and admitting, without admitting that he fraudulently listed all these big names, dropping them, quote unquote. Because if you look on his clients list, none of the big names are on there anymore. This was his way to get out of admitting that he never repped them to begin with. The story's only going to get stranger from here. Before we go, though, I have one more thing. And, you know, yet once again, there's more about not only actors and celebrities who he's been frauding, but photographers. I mean, we're gonna touch over one of the biggest cases of fraud, which actually these were illegal acts right here that we're about to discuss. It's kind of hard to explain why anybody would think this would make sense to do in any scenario, and trying to be a fraud and pass yourself off as something. But a major thing, now unfortunately I don't have this post that I'm going to talk about right here, but late last year Sean posted on Strangeland Oddities and on his own page that he laughingly that he was one of the best concert photographers out there, and he would put any of his pictures against any photographer out there in a contest. And the funny thing is, I can't speak for 100%, but I've got enough evidence and I've seen enough photos and I've contacted enough photographers to know, indeed, most of these concert photos and Strangeland Oddities are, in fact, other photographers' photos that he has stolen and put the actual, his watermark on their pictures and passing it off as his own. And this ties back to this original website, because this whole website was covering a face-down media scam. And when you look at his Strangeland Oddities concert photos, one of the, and quite a few of the albums, one of the things it mentions is face-down media. You know, it's really simple. I got my inkling to discover these fraudulent acts when we started getting messages repeatedly. Like, within a week I got 2 or 3 people from overseas stating that photos from overseas concerts were theirs and Sean had stolen them.
And I asked Sean about them, and Sean was like, "Those aren't. They're just being crazy. That's why I put watermarks on my stuff to make sure I can people can verify." Well, the idiot that he is apparently doesn't realize that Google is a thing, and you can search photos. So I started going through Google. I'd go on Strangeland Oddities. I'd see what concerts he had photos of, and I would just type in Limp Bizkit concert or Motionless in White concert. And you just keep scrolling through the pictures, and sure enough, you're going to run into the pictures that he has on his site. But the difference is they're not linking to his site. The pictures that I discovered were actual pictures from different photographers who took them, legit photography websites, and I sent them emails